Well, good day, everyone, and welcome to the Astadia webinar series, A Phased Approach to Legacy Modernization. This will be a four-part series starting with today's session focused on preparing for the project. Future sessions will cover best practices for executing on your plan and a session on going live. The final session will be a discussion on why legacy modernization is so critical to your digital transformation. The Astadia legacy modernization practice has more than 25 years experience with these kinds of projects. We've worked with clients in just about every industry vertical, as well as with a variety of state and federal agencies. Today's speaker is Craig Marble, Solution Director in the Astadia Legacy Modernization practice. Craig has over 25 years of IT experience, and most of it has been focused on leading complex legacy modernization projects. So Craig, I'll advance to your first slide and hand the controls over to you.
Great, thanks, Greg. Thanks everybody for joining today. We're glad that you're with us. I want to start out this presentation about preparing for a modernization project, giving a quick discussion on the challenges that are facing the CIO today. So if you think about the role of IT, historically it's really been to support the business, and that has really changed dramatically, especially over the past, I would say, 10 years or so. So now more than ever, IT isn't expected just to support the business, it's expected to drive revenue. So instead of just providing calculations and balances, et cetera, it's really meant to bring customers to the business. So in addition to that, CIOs today are faced with the continuous pressure to do more with less, and not only do more with less, but to have a really good positive outcome, and that's a huge challenge. And you couple that with the change in market demands, which are constantly shifting, meaning people expect more from their the companies that they choose to work with. So the user expectations and requirements are continually on the rise, while this do more with less is coming down from the accounting group and the business group. And then you add to that the fact that the technological advancements are accelerating. So it seems like every couple of months there's this new technology that is really gaining traction, and you need to be able to exploit that quickly. And on top of all that, budgets are tighter than ever, so your IT spend is under greater scrutiny than it ever has been before. So let's talk about how we modernize the legacy portfolios that you have. And this slide that you're seeing right here is really one of the most important tools that we use when we are embarking on a modernization strategy and preparing for it. And it is a sort of a cost-benefit analysis of your existing portfolio, and it helps you determine how you're going to modernize. So what I want to do now is tell you how we get to this space here. So one of the first things that you have to do is understand why it is that you want to transform. So it's easy to say, yeah, we're going to modernize. Well, what is driving that desire to modernize? Is it costs, which certainly everybody wants to reduce costs, and reducing costs up till now has been a very big driver, in fact, probably the biggest driver that we have seen from our customers who embark on modernization journeys. However, we're seeing this second bullet point, reduce risk from the burning platforms to retiring staff, starting to equate or perhaps surpass the cost-cutting measures that has traditionally been the primary driver for modernization. But there certainly are other things that you want to do, such as improve performance of the applications that you have, improving your time to market. You may be in a business where you have to comply with regulations, such as the health industry and the finance industry, and those regulations come out on a fairly regular basis, and so you need to be able to accommodate those changes and comply with those regulations quickly and with a minimum of impact on your day-to-day business. So there are also things like exploiting new technologies and expanding into new markets, getting a new customer base. So all of these things are very important when you're determining what it is that you want to do when you transform, what the driver is. And one of the big ones is a lot of customers, well, they want to focus on the core business, not the infrastructure that runs it, but they want to be able to just do what it is they do and not worry about the technology. So it's important to understand why it is that you want to transform. Then you need to understand where you want to go. So it's one thing to say, okay, I want to modernize, but what do you want to modernize to? What is your vision for the end state of your application environment or your IT infrastructure as a whole? So are you looking for heterogeneous technology mix where you're using the best technology for each job? So if a certain task or a certain application works best if it's written in C#, that's what you're going to use. Or if it's best written in COBOL, that's what you're going to use, or Java, etc. But there are some organizations who say, you know what, we are more concerned about a homogeneous environment, meaning I want to standardize on one platform to keep it simple. I want to do everything in C#. I want to do everything in Java. So those are some possibilities on your end state, the vision that you have. You need to consider what about preserving your business rule investment. So you have developed business rules over a long period of time. What's your vision for that? Are you willing to toss out what you have and bring in something new, or are you going to try to preserve what you already have invested in? Could be that you're looking for a package solution that meets all of your requirements. You know, a lot of companies say, I don't want to be in the application writing business. I would rather have somebody else do that for me. So maybe a package solution is where you're headed. It could be that you are embarking on a full-scale cloud deployment, meaning you know, I don't want these siloed applications in various groups. I want to put everything into the cloud in one place. It could be a private cloud that I have on-prem, or it could be an off-prem cloud that I'm hosting in Azure or Amazon Web Services, something like that. Or you could even take a bigger step and say, you know what, I'm going to hand it all off to somebody else. I want to get out of the IT business, period. I just want to be able to tell somebody, here's what I need, and then let them deal with it. You also need to consider what it is that your business partners and users are requiring when you're determining where it is that you want to be. So you have some immediate needs to fulfill for your users and your partners, but you need to consider what are the future needs going to be. So that's something to take into consideration. It's actually a pretty important part to take into consideration. And then the next thing is, on any journey that you embark on, before you know, or before you can get where you want to go, you have to figure out where you are. What's my starting point? And this is one of the biggest tasks of preparation that I think is the biggest challenge, and that is getting a complete and accurate list of everything you have. And that means all of the environments that you're running. You may have some Windows environments, you may have some Linux environments, Unix environments. You need to get a full understanding of all of that infrastructure environment stuff, including applications that are running in those environments, all of the languages that you have, all of the databases that you have, the different database types. They could be hierarchical, they could be relational, perhaps they're flat files, but you need to have a complete list of databases and what packages that you have. So if you're going to move from one platform to another, are there packages that you're currently running on the platform that you expect to get rid of? This is important information that you need to know. All the way down to the littlest utilities that you use. So I know utilities are a dime a dozen, but they do perform a function, and that function is very important. And if there is a utility that you have to use on one platform, you need to make sure on your target environment that that utility or some equivalent is present, or perhaps it needs to be developed. Even down to a list of users and what they're doing with your application, why the application is important to them, and the test scripts that go along with testing your application. So if you're going to move to a new environment, it's clear you're going to be doing quite a bit of testing to ensure that everything is working correctly. So those test scripts come in to play there and are pretty important. And then for each application that you uncover, you need to list out what is the purpose of the application and what is the importance of that application. Sort of, if at a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this to my day-to-day business and the operations for my company, as well as the requirements. So is this an application that is used once a week by a group of 10 people, or is it an application that is used around the clock by people around the globe? So those are important things you need to take into consideration before you start your journey. So what you get from all this is this grid, and you'll see on here you've got this, on the left-hand side, it says technical architecture, and that really means a lot of things. That means what's the cost of the application, what is the composition of it, is it fitting into my overall vision or my current environment that maybe I've standardized on language-wise, infrastructure-wise. And then on the bottom you see this business value, meaning low business value on the left-hand side and a really high business value on the right-hand side. And then we take all that information that we get from parsing the code and talking to your users and talking to your developers, and we come up with this grid that maps out your application and how they fit into your current environment. So for example, the bottom left quadrant is not where you want to be. So you see that big round circle in the middle there, in the bottom left quadrant there, and that means you've got a big application that has pretty low business value, and it is not fitting well in your strategy or your technical architecture, meaning it's high cost. Maybe it's an esoteric language that you don't have a lot of skill sets in anymore. So it's kind of at the bottom, right? So these are applications that you want to take a look at to eliminate, replace them with something else, something that fits a lot better into your strategic environment. And then still on the low business value side, but maybe they fit really well in your environment, would be the upper left quadrant. So maybe you've got some applications that, yeah, they probably don't provide a lot of business value, but hey, they don't cost me anything to run, and they do provide some purpose, but I can tolerate them because of the way they mesh into my environment. Then on the the bottom right quadrant is what you want to focus on for modernizing. So these are applications that have a lot of value. I mean, they are critical need to run applications, but maybe they don't fit so well in your technical architecture. So perhaps these are mainframe applications or applications running on a burning platform, and you're looking to move away from that platform or move away from that mainframe into something that's more open systems in nature. So these are the ones that you want to focus on to modernize, because what you really want to do is to get everything up into that top right quadrant, the invest side. So these are the applications that are kind of the golden child of your portfolio. They do what they need to do, they fit well in your strategy, and they are what you want to focus on for investing in the future. So what we do is we take then this this grid, this mapping, and then we use all of that information around those to assemble a plan. So once you get all these pieces together, you need to assemble your modernization strategy and plan. So at this point, you need to really nail down your requirements. What are the requirements for your new environment? Choose the target and the platform. What is my preferred operating environment? Is it Windows? Is it Linux? Is it something just in the cloud and I don't care what it is? And what is your modernization approach? Is it going to be a rewrite? Is it going to be a migration or a mixture of the two? Determine all the interdependencies of your applications, and I can't emphasize enough how important this is, because it doesn't do any good if you move an application to a new environment and take it out of an old environment and then find out that there are some dependencies that you missed and then something breaks. So this is an important piece of your analysis. It's important to identify all the risks inherent in your modernization strategy and figure out how you're going to mitigate those risks. So an example of this could be a rollback strategy, right? So I'm going to have a cutover weekend. I'm going to cut over to the new application come Monday morning. If that new application in the new environment doesn't run like it's supposed to, what is my fallback? And then you need to develop a realistic schedule. I know it's easy to take a look at a calendar and pick some dates and say, okay, this is where I want to be on this date, but you need to apply some logic to that, some realistic information to say, okay, based on the number of programs that I have, the number of developers I have, and the amount of data that I have, I don't think I can meet that specific date. I better add 6 months to it, et cetera. So try to develop a realistic schedule, because there's nothing worse than setting out expectations for your stakeholders and then having to go back to them and say, oh yeah, that date isn't going to be realistic for us. And then estimating the cost. So this is another important aspect of it, because it goes beyond just the cost of the work to move it. It has to take into consideration the hours that it's going to take to do it. You have to take into consideration the replacement software, as well as any hardware that you may have to use. Now, you may be able to leverage some hardware that you already have, so you want to factor that into your cost, as well as what you're going to save. So moving from, for example, a mainframe to a distributed environment, you can save yourself a lot of money. So that needs to be factored into the cost and the return on investment. And then you need to explain your entire transition plan and the benefits of that transition plan to the stakeholders, because you have to get budget for this, right? You have to get approval, you have to get funding. So it's important that you have a concise, well thought out strategy and plan to be able to answer the inevitable questions that you're going to get. So now I wanted to just cover some of the top two do's and don'ts that we see in modernization projects, and I'm going to start out with the don'ts. So my top don't is don't do nothing, and we see this all the time. Customers say, you know what, I need to modernize, it's important to me. So they sit down, they take a look at all of their stuff, they start to get a little overwhelmed, and they dig deeper, and they just say, oh my gosh, this is going to be a lot of work, and I'm not sure I want to take it on right now, so they do nothing. That happens a lot. The problem is that, yeah, it's a fairly cheap solution, but it's going to cost you more in the long run, because the longer you do nothing, the more catch-up you have to do. So don't do nothing. Don't make assumptions. This is important because if you think about that grid, maybe there was an application that initially was in the bottom left quadrant. Maybe it's a medium-sized application and it doesn't fit well in your environment, and it costs you a fair amount of money to keep it going, and you've only got 2 users in it, and you say, oh, well, you know, that's something I need to eliminate. But you may find out after the fact, and when it's too late, that those 2 users were doing data mining that is critical to making decisions for your executives or for the business as a whole. So you need to make sure that you don't make assumptions in your analysis. So a proper analysis would say, okay, this doesn't fit in my environment and it's costing me a lot of money, but instead of having it down in the eliminate lower left quadrant, I need to put it up to tolerate and then move it over to the invest. So just make sure that you don't make assumptions about the applications and the systems that you're working with. And don't rewrite just for the sake of rewriting. So I can't tell you how many times we talk to customers and they say, you know what, we've got a bunch of old languages. Those languages don't work for us anymore, and we just think they're outdated, and we want to go with all new stuff. So we're going to rewrite everything in C#. And, you know, man, it sounds great. It really does. But the fact of the matter is, it is a proven fact that 80% of rewrite projects fail. They just do. So it's just not a great approach to take just for the sake of doing it. It's costly, and there's just a lot of risk involved with it. So don't rewrite unless there's a really compelling reason to. And that kind of leads into my last don't, and that is don't underestimate the value of legacy systems. So you may have a 30, maybe even a 40-year-old COBOL application that works well. It's been tuned over 40 years. The business rules have been accumulating over 40 years. That has a lot of value. So it'd be a lot less expensive and a lot less risky to leverage that legacy system as much as you can rather than starting from scratch. So those are my don'ts. So let's get to the do's now. So my top do's are do internal marketing and awareness. And what I mean by that is you need to embark on a program that informs people of what's happening. So modernization is pretty scary, especially to developers who have been working in a certain environment for a long period of time. And if they hear, hey, we have this modernization project going on, but they don't know anything about it, then they start to get a little worried and maybe aren't as helpful as they could be because they're, of course, thinking, well, what about me? How does this affect me? So it's important that you make all of your folks aware of what it is that you're doing and make sure that they understand that there's more to your systems than just programming. There is knowledge about the business and about how the applications work that has value. So those people who may be worried about, hey, I'm a COBOL programmer, and gosh, is this all going to be in C#? And, okay, so maybe some of it will be, maybe it'll be developing COBOL in Visual Studio instead of on the mainframe or in some other tool, but they still have value and they bring value to your organization. Do exploit existing systems where possible. And what I mean by that is we have had some customers who get off of the mainframe, and in fact, they don't have to purchase any more hardware. They can leverage the existing hardware and systems around those hardwares, and it saves them a lot of money. So you could have a lot of capacity on your network environment and your distributed environment to run a lot of these applications. And again, I mentioned this briefly before, do leverage the developer's knowledge and experience. And that goes back to, it's more than just coding. It is knowledge of how things work, how your business works. And do engage experts. This is a pretty significant undertaking, and it's critical that it is successful. So don't go it alone. If you have doubts about whether you have the expertise in-house to do it, be sure to engage experts because that can make all the difference in the world. And of course, we at Astadia would be very happy to help you out with that. So the next part of this, which will be coming up in a couple weeks, is how you execute your legacy modernization project. And so we're going to talk you through some of the best practices of the actual modernization itself. And that'll be coming up in a couple of weeks, and you'll be getting an email about that. So right now, I'd like to open it up to Q&A. Greg?
Craig, thank you very much. We actually have two questions come in. The first one is, what is the most difficult aspect of a typical modernization project?
Okay, great. So I think what I'm going to do is we've got our Senior Director of Modernization on the line who's joined us, Steve Stewart, and I think I'm going to hand that question over to Steve.
Thank you, Craig. It's interesting, when you think about the top challenges that you would have in a modernization project, you would think it'd be the technology or anything like that. But the reality is it's right down to people and process. The last thing you want in a modernization project are the passive-aggressive individuals that show up to help. And I say that kind of lightly, but the reality, you got to identify the team that clearly knows where the mission is and where they want to go, and that have embraced it. And you're going to have some folks that are going to be straggling along, but at the end of the day, modernization has been around for many, many years. The technology works. And the ones that fail are because of people, breakage in people and process. So focus on the team, and the rest will fall into place. Secondary thing is do not underestimate the testing effort, right? These are undocumented applications, and testing is a very key component for that. Okay.
All right.
Okay, excellent. Second question, and Craig, I'll again address this to you. If you want to hand off to Steve, that's fine. The question is, if I'm going to modernize, wouldn't I be better off just replacing with new languages instead of using a solution that keeps the old languages?
Sure. Hey, Steve, you want to handle that one too?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I agree with the question as to what you're stating, but, you know, modernization is a journey. And if that is your end state to go into the newer languages, then you can do that. You have different options to actually be able to do that. You can take your existing code and go to a code transformation process, and then the end result is you have what I call Franken code. It's neither Java or .NET or COBOL. It's just a Franken code state. Or you could go the other route, which is the route that I've been advocating, is you go to a lift and shift model and start leveraging the technology that exists within these COBOL compilers to run in a managed code set or run into a Java, and have the ability for your existing Java developers or .NET developers consume classes that are written in COBOL, and start doing that hybrid approach, and start moving slowly but surely over to the .NET arena. And writing new applications in .NET and Java and coexisting with your COBOL. The technologies exist today to be able to have everything in place under Visual Studio or Eclipse or whatever, but that is the safe approach to go about, you know, going to the newer technologies. Now, there's a part B to that, is packages, right? I think you should look at COTS as for replacement as well. Look at what maps to it very nicely, right? AP, right? You shouldn't have a COBOL app in AP, but if you have a customized app that's yours, you could do that. But keep in point, like Craig stated, you know, COTS applications can be very costly. You either adopt to the business rules and practices from the workflows that exist within the package, or the package adopts to you, and both are costly.
Okay. Yeah, and I would just add one more thing, and that is, if you take the approach of, you know, for example, taking a COBOL application that's healthy and it runs well in the mainframe, but it's costing you an arm and a leg, and you move it down to a distributed environment, that's going to be a lot less expensive than a rewrite. And that money, that is the delta between rewriting and migrating, that money is a huge amount of investment towards new technologies. So there's a lot better things you can spend your money on than rewriting an application. Let's say you're going to do it in Java, just as an example, and in 10 years, that in itself is going to be a legacy application. In fact, you see articles today talking about what to do with your legacy Java. So, is there really any benefit of hopefully getting the same functionality that you had before? And so you end up, application X is the same as application Y. It's just one different language. And what's the benefit there? So.
Okay, good answers. Gentlemen, there are no further questions at this time, so I just want to thank both of you for your time and expertise today, and remind the audience that we'll be getting invitations out for the second part of this series within the next week or so. Again, thanks everybody.